This is the third in a series of videos about the Enhanced Data Display, or EDD. EDD was created as part of the National Weather Service's Weather Ready Nation pilot project based in Charleston, West Virginia. My name is Chris Leonardi, and I'm going to explain some of the recent interface changes that have occurred in the recent versions of EDD. Now, before we begin, here are a couple of reminders. EDD is still an experimental service and is under continuous development. You still may see bugs and data issues pop up from time to time. Also, as we release new versions, changes, additions, and deletions to the interface or features are possible at any time. Here are the interface changes we will be covering in this short presentation. It is assumed that you are fairly comfortable with the location and operation of the various features of EDD. If you need a refresher, feel free to view the previous videos. Okay, it's time to dive in and see the new features. As a reminder, here is the internet address that you need to visit. So here is EDD. The interface should still look familiar to you. Notice that as of this recording, we are using version 3.1. There are plenty of small changes to the features in the interface that I won't go over in this video. If you want a more comprehensive listing of what has changed over the past few versions, you can go up to the Help menu in the upper right, and then in the window that pops up, click on Version Changelog, and that will give you a listing of what has changed over the past few versions. But for now, we will close this and prepare to talk about the major new features in the last few versions of EDD. Now, one of the biggest changes to EDD over the past several versions has been the removal of the profile system and the inclusion of the Share button. Now, you'll remember Profiles, which used to be available in the Tools menu, was the system that we used to save off layers and options so that you could call them up quickly again later. While that system didn't always work as intended and tended to be unwieldy to use, so we went ahead and replaced that with the Share button down here on the bottom bar. Now, to show you how this works, suppose I have the display set up the way I like with observations, satellite, the watch's warnings, as well as the highs, lows, and fronts. That's a new feature also in EDD. If you're interested in displaying those, you can click this small button next to the Observations quick layer. Now, if I'm interested in saving this display or sharing it possibly with somebody else, what I can do is click the Share button and we'll come up with this window with two URLs inside. The long URL is the more explicit one that contains all the options and the layers and so forth. It tends to be kind of long and tough to use. So you're going to gravitate more likely towards the tiny URL here. Now, the tiny URL is the one that condenses all this long information into this tiny one, which will be persistent, so it will bring up the same display indefinitely into the future. Now, the advantage of using the URL is that I can save this as a bookmark in my browser and bring it up quickly again. I can also share this via Facebook with this button, or I can send it in an email to somebody if I'm interested in showing them this display. Now, when you share the display, it is not a simple screenshot. What we'll do is bring up the layers and options with the latest data, so you will always have up-to-date data in the format that you would like. Now, to simulate the effect of copying this into a new window, you can click this Go to Link button here, and it will refresh the display with the same options as previously selected. This would be similar to saving off that link as a bookmark and or pasting it into a new window in the browser. And as you can see, the display is refreshing with the same data, the same zoom level, the same display options, everything, all contained in that tiny URL. It might bring up these small helper windows, but you can simply minimize those and get them out of the way. And again, this is a great way to share a display with somebody or to save it for yourself for later use using that Share button. Now, the next feature I want to talk about is the Quick Forecast function. You might have noticed on the top bar a couple of new icons next to the hourglass for the auto refresh. Currently reading sunny and 74 degrees. That is the current condition at a location that I selected. Now, if I float the mouse pointer over that, you will see a new window with observation and forecast information for the point, which is near Cincinnati. On top, we have that observation information for the airport that is named there. If I click Graph Ob History, it will bring up the graphical display of observation history that you are familiar with if you've clicked on one of the surface observations before. Change site on map click is how you change the location, and I'll show how that works in a second. Below this, you have a graph for 7-day forecast that shows the highs and lows on the temperature curve, and you can get the hourly temperatures even by floating the mouse pointer over it. And on the back here, we have the green bars with probability of precipitation for each 12-hour period during the 7 days. Now, if I want to change this location, what I can do is click this Change Site on Map Click button. You'll see the color change. Then what you will do is right-click somewhere on the map where you want the forecast information to come from. So what I will do is click on a point near Chicago. I right-click here, and you see the icon on top there change to sunny and 71 degrees. Now if I float my mouse pointer over it, you will see that the observation site has changed to the Lansing Municipal Airport. You will see the temperature and forecast information for that point as well. Now I can keep changing this location as long as this button is depressed. I can keep right-clicking and changing this location, and you'll see the icon change as I move around. Now when I finally get to a point where I want to save this location, I have to go back in, click this button again to unpress it, and now that will persist. And even if I refresh the display, that location will come up once again. So this quick forecast functionality is a nice way to get a very fast look at observation and forecast information at a location of your choosing. Next, I want to talk about the feedback options and tell you how you can help us improve ED. If you click on the feedback button here on the upper right, you will see this window pop up. Now, if you've used the feedback function before, you'll be familiar with this lower section. This is where you can send an email directly to the developer for a feature request, or if you see an error or things like that. Up top now, however, there's a large button that says click here to provide official feedback. Now remember, ED is an experimental system, and part of that experiment is collecting comments from the general public about its usability, new features, and whether or not the service should continue at all. Now clicking this button will bring up that survey with the relevant questions. We would really appreciate it if you filled out this survey, because this will help speed ED out of the experimental phase and into the operational phase if we get good comments and good suggestions on how to improve the service. So again, you can reach this by clicking the feedback button in the upper right and then clicking the large button that comes up in the feedback window. It would be very helpful and help us to improve ED and make it something that everybody could enjoy. Finally, I'll introduce a few of the new buttons in the interface. Starting here on the upper left, you'll see the Clear All button, and just as the name implies, clicking it will clear all the layers on the display. It of course will leave the background map intact. Moving on down to the bottom row now, you'll still see buttons for various sub-windows that you might have been using from time to time, such as the observation controls or NWS chat or so forth. Minimizing them will bring them back down into this lower left section. Moving on over, we have the state overlay button, and sometimes when you have certain layers up, it can be very easy to lose your bearings and lose the state borders. For example, here is a satellite picture and I've lost the state boundaries. They're very difficult to see. If I click this button, it will bring back a state overlay so that you can quickly get your bearings depending on what layer you're choosing and using. Now the share button here, of course, we covered earlier. Moving on to the lower right, there are two more buttons. Show UTM USNG will bring up additional coordinate systems in addition to latitude, longitude. This is useful for applications such as search and rescue, military, and other things, and that can be toggled on and off with this button. Finally, on the lower right, we have the Privacy PDD button, which will bring up links to the Department of Commerce, NOAA, and the National Weather Service, the privacy policy, and other information. In particular, the PDD is the product description document. You can click that and check it out if you'd like more details on the experiment that is the enhanced data display. Thank you for viewing this video and for using the enhanced data display. Look for additional videos in the near future. To leave feedback, use the feedback function in ED as we showed you earlier, or you can post a comment on the enhanced data display page on Facebook.